Hello, and welcome to Chagpar MD. I'm Dr. Anise Chagpar, and this week I have a very special guest. Nicolle Surratte is a breast cancer survivor. You may have heard about her if you watched another video that we did with Candace Price. You remember that she talked about a friend, Nicolle, who really helped guide her through her journey and helped to give her some inspiration to get involved in clinical trials. Well, I thought, who better to talk about getting through the cancer journey than the person who helped Candace out? So thank you so much for being here with me today, Nicolle.
I appreciate the invitation.
So you're a cancer survivor as well. Maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about your journey. How did everything start?
Oh my. So I celebrated my 9th cancerversary in June. And I'll tell you that the diagnosis was very much a surprise based on how I had been taking care of myself since high school. So I was kind of one of those by the book people. So everything that you've ever read about how not to get any type of a diagnosis, I was doing. I didn't drink, didn't smoke, exercise, ate right. And not only did I get a diagnosis, I got an advanced stage breast cancer diagnosis at that. So everything was a surprise for me, but I knew that there was purpose in my diagnosis from the very beginning. I knew that there was a reason why I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It took me a minute to figure it out, but I figured it out. And it wasn't that I felt a lump or anything. I woke up one morning and the breast looked different. And I just thought, oh, I just slept on that side. They're just lines that I see from pajamas. It'll be gone, no problem. And I went to work as usual, did what I needed to do afterwards. And when I came home that evening and got ready to go to bed, nothing changed in the appearance. And I thought, pajama lines don't last that long. So I knew that there was something not right. And when I called my OBGYN, I couldn't get an appointment for another month. And fortunately, I have a very good girlfriend who's a nurse. And when I told her what I saw, she said, call them back and tell them that it's an emergency. And because of her recommendation, I was able to get an appointment the very next week, and it just took off from there.
So Nicolle, I want to unpack a couple of things in what you just said, which I think are really important for our viewers. The first is you said that you didn't feel a lump, that the breast just looked different. Tell us a little bit about what it looked like, because so many people out there are going to think, if I don't feel a lump, can't possibly be breast cancer. So there's, a little bit of a rash or something, that's not breast cancer. What did your breast look like, and what do people need to be looking for in terms of breast cancer?
For me, the breasts look pushed in, but the technical term is inverted. So the nipple was inverted, and which was not normal for me. So I definitely want your viewers to know, you need to know what looks normal for you. And the minute that something doesn't look the same that it did the day before, that's a signal. You may find a lump, you may not. The nipple may be inverted as it was for me. There may be some type of discharge from the nipple, whether it's clear or bloody, warmth in the breast, swelling, anything like that that is not your normal is enough to warrant a phone call.
Yeah.
So we've got to really know our breasts. Doing the breast exams and all of that, that's great, but you really need to look at what your breast looks like. And again, when something doesn't look like it did the day before, that's a red flag.
Yeah, so I think that that's so important, right? Is that it's not just whether you feel a lump, it can be all of these other things. And I think the second important thing that you mentioned is that you really were an advocate for yourself. So when you couldn't get an appointment for a month and you called your friend who was a nurse and they said, no, you've got to push back and say, no, I really need to be seen now. I think that that's another message for women out there who may say, well, I called the doctor and they're not available for a month, so I guess I'll wait. What do you have to say for them?
call.
Yeah.
If you can't get an appointment, call back, express that it's an emergency. I'll also give you this little backdrop on me, Dr. Chagpar. I had a benign tumor when I was 22 or 23. Now, mind you, I'm only 25. I've celebrated my 25th birthday a number of times. So, and nobody ever said anything about the possibility of something coming back. It was benign. I had it removed. And back then, that was like minor surgery. I had to have a caregiver with me. I couldn't drive, all of that. And after it happened, I just really didn't think anything of it. Now, I had to, as a result, get my mammograms started early and do that on a regular basis. And I had my mammogram the year before. I noticed the breast change in June. So, it's important to know that something, if you have had an issue, something can come back. It's not like you just have a 2-year window or a 5-year window. For me, it was like a 20+ year window. Same side. This time it was malignant, the tumor, as opposed to being benign.
Yeah, and it could well be that you had a benign tumor removed, and those are fairly common. And it's not necessarily that it came back, but that maybe you developed a new cancer in the same
Yes.
breast. And
Right.
so people need to know that, whether you've had a history or not, you can still get breast cancer, because the other thing that you pointed out, which I think is really important, is that you had been doing everything right. And this is a question that we get asked all the time. Doctor, why did I get breast cancer? I do everything right. I eat right. I exercise. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I go to church on Sundays. Like, why did I get breast cancer? Is that a question that you asked your doctors? And if so, what did they tell you?
I actually did not ask my doctors that. I also did not ask God that. My question to God, because my faith is my backbone, that's my core. There's no way I could have gotten through my cancer journey without, having a relationship with God. My question to God was, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Right. And I
So
think that is
again,
so important.
yeah, I knew that there was purpose. So my thing is, okay, I've had some other challenges in my life that, God handled those things. And it was like, okay, well, if he could handle a divorce and, me becoming a single mom, he can handle a breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
So, I always kept that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I think
And may I also say this, when you talked about people advocating for themselves, in case you have some young viewers, because of the work that I do, and I know we'll talk about that at some point, I have heard one too many stories from young women who said, something didn't look right, something didn't feel right. I went to the doctor said, you're too young for breast cancer, come back and see me in a year. They go back in a year, and yes, it's breast cancer. And now we've lost a year of treatment. So if you are a young woman, or it doesn't even have to be a young woman, you know your body best. If something doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, and you get a response like that, find another doctor, because time is of the essence. If you can avoid some breast cancer treatment hiccups along the path where you can take an easier route, the faster that somebody knows about it, gets all of your tests and puts you on some type of a treatment plan, the faster, the better.
Yeah, I think that that's so important in terms of really advocating for yourself, knowing your own body. And you know what? If you are not satisfied with the answer that you get, or even if you are satisfied but you still have questions, getting a second opinion is not something to be afraid of. It's not something to shun. Your doctor's not going to hate you if you get a second opinion. It really is advocating for yourself and taking best care of your health. So the other question that people have when we get back to why do some people get breast cancer, and oftentimes there's no good reason aside from this is just something that happens, and the two main risk factors are being a woman and getting older. Like what are you going to do? um
Right.
but did you have a family history? Because that's the other thing that oftentimes people ask about.
No, no family history. And as you know, most women who get a diagnosis do not have family history. But I will say that when I started my treatment, family history was one of the first things that came up. And I was able to pull out a piece of paper and go down a list of all of my relatives on my father's side. And my father there were 14 of them. So I had been having conversations with the matriarch of the family. I knew what everybody passed from. So family medical history is super important. And unfortunately, those are conversations that a lot of families don't want to have.
Yeah.
Cancer has been that kind of hush hush secret thing. Let's sweep it under the carpet, and we're not going to have a conversation about it. But we need to have those conversations, because you need to know what your risk factors are. And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody else had breast cancer in your family. There are other cancers that are linked to breast cancer. So you need to know family history on your mother's side as well as on your father's side. I did not have the history on my mother's side. My mother was one of 5 children, and at the time of my diagnosis, only 2 were living. And my mother, I was her caregiver. She was in a nursing home dealing with Alzheimer's. So I couldn't reach out to her for family history. So her brother was able to give me the family history that I need. So that is so important. And it's also important for future generations. If you have, for example, a history of high blood pressure or diabetes, those young children need to know that, because we can't wait until they get to be young adults to have those conversations. And now we're asking them to eat differently or change their lifestyle. If we know that in the beginning, let's set them up on a good track from the beginning, where their likelihood of receiving one of those types of diagnoses is very low. So I
Yeah.
think that's having that conversation about family medical history is important for us and future generations. And for us not to have those conversations, Dr. Chagbar, I think is selfish.
Yeah. So, again, I think a few key points here. So, one is most people who get breast cancer actually do not have a family history. The second thing is that it's important to know your family history on both your mom's side and your dad's side. And the third is that your family history actually includes things other than just breast cancer. So, for all of our viewers out here, I'm going to link for you our video on hereditary breast cancer syndromes, where you can actually see how breast cancer is related to other cancers, as well as other benign things as well in various syndromes. So back to your story, Nicolle. So you finally get in to see the OBGYN the following week, because you had noticed this nipple inversion that didn't go away. What happened next?
I saw my OBGYN and she had concerns. I left with a phone number to get another mammogram. It went from the mammogram to, I believe it was a needle biopsy. And actually, there was a little space between there, because the only time that I could get an appointment, I was scheduled to go on vacation. And I said, you know what? I need to go on vacation. I didn't want to cut my vacation short to come back, and now I'm worried about, what these test results may reveal. I said, I just need to go away, act like none of this has happened, just have a great time, and then when I come back, I'll deal with that. So
Okay.
I got the phone call while I was at work.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I was the last one in the office. I was the manager. I was happy that I was the last one there. And, I was on my way out the door. The phone rang. I had no intentions on answering the phone because I'm on my way out the door. But when the caller ID revealed that it was the doctor, I thought, why is the doctor calling me? So I picked it up, And once the doctor said to me it was cancer, I can't tell you anything else the doctor said after that, because everything on me just went numb. My mind, my hands, everything just went numb. And I had to get home as soon as possible. But I walked to my car, and I remember it like it was yesterday, just with this feeling of numbness. And I mentioned this in my book. You know, I got stopped at a red light, and I glanced in my rearview mirror, and I saw that the woman behind me was a little bit overweight, and she was smoking a cigarette. And I thought, wait a minute. Again, as I shared, I never smoked, I never drank, I exercised, I ate right. Cancer? And I don't even know how I got home safely, because the floodgates just opened, and I just tears all the way home. Fortunately, it was a short drive. And when I pulled up to my driveway, I knew that I would enter my house a very different woman than the person who left that morning. And to walk in my house and to experience the loudness in the silence, just me rehearsing in my mind her saying cancer, was like, wow. Yeah.
How do you deal with that, Nicolle? I mean, since that time, you've now been an advocate and a supporter for many breast cancer patients, and you know that feeling of, oh my gosh, what just happened? My world has been turned upside down. That feeling, I think that's pretty common for all cancer patients, or the majority, anyways. To finally get from that deer in the headlights, oh my gosh, what just happened? My world turned upside down, to I'm going to be okay. For those who have a backbone in faith as you did, what is my purpose? What am I going to learn from this? I will move forward. There is a space between those two mindsets. How do you get from one to the other?
It happened for me very quickly. When I got home, so at this point, I'm a single mom. Both of my children are in college. My first call was to my second mom, because as I said, my biological mom was in a nursing home dealing with Alzheimer's, so that wasn't going to be a conversation. I called my second mom, and she suggested where I should call for treatment. And then my next call was to my third mom, my spiritual mom, because I knew that not only would I need a medical team, I knew that I was going to have a dependency on God like I had never had before. So when I talked to her, let her know what was going on, and our conversation ended in prayer. And then, you know, I remember sitting there and having a good cry. And then God got my attention. And as I alluded to earlier, he reminded me that the years that I spent on Separated Street and Divorce Drive, everything my children and I needed during those times, he provided. And I came to the conclusion, you know what? He did that and some. He can handle this. And so I just went, and at that point, Dr. Chagpar, my goal was living by any means necessary. And when I say any means necessary, one of the first conversations I had with a bosom buddy, you know, she said to me, do you eat tomatoes, blueberries, and strawberries? I said, yuck, yuck, and yuck. No, I don't. She said, well, you need to incorporate them into your diet because they're full of antioxidants and all of that. And this is no joke, Dr. Chagpar. It took me 20 minutes to eat 1 strawberry and 5 blueberries. That's how much I dislike them. But if that was going to help me in this fight, then I was going to have to do it. So now, fast forward, I love blueberries. I love strawberries. Me and tomatoes, we still fight sometimes. But, you know, if that's what it was going to take for me to beat this, then I was willing to do it. So
it sounds like, you know, a few things were really critical in there, in the sense that you had a support system. You had not only your biological mom, but you had 2 other moms and some bosom buddies as well, and kind of gathering around you, not only a medical team, but a social support network was really important. Tell us a little bit more about what happened in terms of your treatment, and both from a medical point of view as well as what did you rely on your support system to help you with?
I'll start with the support system. So as I said, I'm a single mom at this point. All of my I live in Delaware. All of my family lives in the DC area. So they did what they could do over the telephone, but in terms of people being present, my church family really stepped up to the plate. And I'll say to your viewers, in case they have a diagnosis or in case they are somebody's support system, the cancer journey isn't for everybody. And I quickly found out that people that I thought were going to be there, it was too much for them. So they weren't. And then other people that I knew were going to be there on some level really stepped up to the plate in big ways for me. I am, in terms of my church family, I was actually my biological family as well. I was selective in terms of who knew about my diagnosis. The prayer warriors at my church, I made sure all of them know. But there were only a handful of people at the church, in addition to my bishop and first lady and my spiritual mom, just a handful of people who knew. And then in terms of my family, I was selective about who knew. So I had some cousins that we hadn't talked in a number of years, and I didn't want to let them know about my diagnosis, and now they're blowing up my phone. I didn't want that. So I actually didn't tell some of my cousins until about a year later. And that was because I was getting ready to do the Coleman 3-day 60-mile walk. And I announced it there because I needed their financial support. But I made that decision for myself. And that's really important because it's your journey and you have to do it the way you want to do it. So I'll have some conversations as an advocate. I'll talk to some women and they'll say, it just showed up on Facebook because they told a family member made it public and they didn't want it public. So you have to make these decisions early, because if you can't trust somebody to follow what you're asking them to do, don't tell them, because it'll show up on Facebook or somewhere else and you're not ready for that. So a diagnosis is stressful in and of itself. You don't need those other stressors in your life. So I decided early in my journey who was going to know, how I was going to tell them. And so that was helpful for me to be in charge like that. Initially, I was diagnosed as stage 0, maybe a stage 1. And I was an ideal candidate for IORT, which is intraoperative radiation therapy. So with that procedure, they remove the tumor, they give you radiation on the table, and that's it. And I thought, really? That's it? No more radiation, no more chemo. This is great because I got things to do. I got places to go, people to see. This is wonderful. And after that first surgery, my boyfriend was with me at the time. He's now my husband. When I came out from under the anesthesia, I could look in his face and see something was wrong. And he said to me, they weren't able to do the radiation. The tumor spread beyond what the test results initially revealed. So I went from a stage 0, maybe a 1, to the opposite end of the spectrum to a 3C. So an aggressive cancer that will require aggressive treatment that will start off with chemotherapy. And that first chemo treatment, which was 6+ hours, while I was sitting there in the waiting room, I got the call from the nursing home that they needed for me to sign the papers for hospice care for my mom.
Oh my God.
So it's like, oh, okay, not the best time for this call, and I lost her the following month. So it was a lot. And again, I'm doing all of this myself. So I'm working full time. I'm now in full treatment, getting chemo every week, and now I have a funeral to plan. And one of the things that was one of the biggest lessons I learned, Dr. Chagpar, is that, and I didn't realize it, I had the Superwoman syndrome. I was the go-to person for everyone, especially once my mother took ill. I became the matriarch of the family. But prior to that, if friends, family members needed help, advice, money. I was the go-to person. And now I needed help, and I was too proud to ask people for help. But fortunately, I had a girlfriend at church. She recognized that fault in me and didn't hold it against me. And she would leave a bag of groceries on my porch and drive down the street and send me a text message. There's a bag of fruits and vegetables from our garden on your porch. And I'm like, okay, she was able to love me through that craziness. And again, I didn't realize that I had the superwoman complex, and pride was my kryptonite.
Yeah, I think that that's so important because so many women really do have the superwoman complex. They have, for a long time, been the person who takes care of everything. They take care of the kids, they take care of the spouse, they take care of work, they take care of church, they take care of, the kids' baseball games, they take care of everything. And
Right.
the last person on the list is themselves. And, sometimes a diagnosis like this, you kind of have to shift the list a little bit so that
Oh,
you
absolutely.
take care of yourself first too. And don't be afraid to accept and receive help, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For me, I believe that stress had played a part in my diagnosis. So as I said, I was divorced. Now I'm caregiver for my mother. I had a job that was stressful. And as I looked back over that time period, I thought I was managing my stress, but what I realized is that I was just really busy. And so when I talk to survivors, I can identify somebody who has the superwoman complex. And I have to remind them, if you need help, it's okay to ask for help. That's definitely not a sign of weakness, which, asking for help has gotten a bad reputation. But, we are not meant to function in isolation. There are things that somebody else possesses that I need. We're supposed to complement and supplement each other. And so what I do now, when I actually left that job because I realized that I couldn't fight cancer and the people on my job. So I came out of the job, looked for a job, couldn't find one. And then I realized I needed to be on a platform promoting health and wellness as a lifestyle with an emphasis on stress management. Stress is literally killing us. And we have to, as you mentioned, we have to prioritize our health. And I tell women, you have to put you on your to-do list, because if you don't, who will? And we
Exactly.
have to, as you said, make the shift. It's a mindset shift. It's not about me first or me only. It's about me too. As when you get on the airplane, they tell you, if there's an emergency, you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you try to help somebody else. So if we just keep giving and giving and giving and we never refill our cup, now we're on empty and we're running on fumes. And if we go down, then that's going to impact the children, that's going to impact the spouse, it's going to impact other things. So we as women have to take the time, even if you just start with 5 minutes every day, have some me time. It's really important.
Yeah, and it really is not selfish. A lot of women think, well, geez, that's just being selfish. But as you say,
No,
it's really not being selfish. In fact, it helps you to serve others better because you're taking good care of yourself.
you're
So,
right. You're not selfish. It's essential. It's
yeah.
essential.
Now, Nicolle, the other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on, and for all of you viewers out there, Nicolle has a variety of resources on how you can overcome the superwoman syndrome. I'm going to leave all of that in the description box below. But as many of you watched in our video with Candace Price, Nicolle, you were really instrumental in kind of being a support for her, which I think is so wonderful and probably part of your purpose. In going through this cancer journey was to help other women go through it as well.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think was really important in your help and support of Candace was in talking about clinical trials and how important they were. Did you, in your treatment, go through clinical trials? And if so, what was that like? And if not, why not? And then how did you kind of get this wherewithal to kind of give advice to Candace, and tell our audience a little bit more about the advice that you gave her?
Okay. So no, I did not go through any clinical trials. They were never mentioned. I don't know if I even qualify for any clinical trials. I didn't hear about clinical trials until after a couple of years passed, and I started getting more active in the cancer community. So I have been trained in advocacy and public policy. I've also been trained in the science of breast cancer, because even though I spent 20 plus years as an educator, science has never been my strong suit. And I just decided that, I'd like to know more about the disease that, changed my life. So I went through that training and have connected with other advocates around the world, which has been a wonderful experience. And in working with the local cancer hospital, we did an initiative to help communities of color know more about breast cancer, and in particular, triple negative breast cancer. And in my training, I learned about clinical trials and how, especially for women of color, the clinical trials that currently exist are not based on women of color going through them. So if there's something different in our DNA, that is why we are being diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer more often than our white counterparts. Well, why is that? So if there's a DNA component, that already sets up the framework to say there's something different about our makeup, that perhaps other type of commonly used treatments won't be as effective. Well, we won't know that unless more women of color sign up for clinical trials. And right now, I want to say the percentage is at about 2% to 3% of women of color are signing up for clinical trials. And I know some of it has to do with funding. We have to get more women to participate. Otherwise, we'll continue to stay on this same cycle where a treatment from 20 years ago is still the same treatment that they're doing because they don't have anything else available. So it's really important to have women of color participate in clinical trials. And I know, as you know, some of the challenges with that, because communities of color haven't always had the best experiences as it relates to trials. And so I know that there have been some unpleasant and unfair things done over the past. And so people are shying away from those type of trials because there's a lack of trust. And I get that. But I'll tell you, Dr. Chagpar, every woman that I've talked to about clinical trials, especially as it relates to triple negative breast cancer, when I explain to them why it's so important that they participate so that we can have trials that are based on us, every one of them has said yes.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of the situations where when somebody signs up for a clinical trial, it not only benefits those current participants, but it impacts future generations of women who may be diagnosed with breast cancer in the future.
Yeah.
And again, everyone has said yes.
I think that that's so important. I mean, because we all are aware of, really devastatingly terrible events that have happened in the past where, women of color, men of color, people of color, and other minorities have really not been treated ethically in terms of clinical research. And I think the key points that you made are that, number one, first of all, there are now very rigorous ethical parameters set up that will prevent that from ever happening again, knock on wood. And two, that in order to really get therapies that we know will work in a given population, we need to have those people participate in clinical trials. Otherwise, we're going to treat you the same as the people who participated in the clinical trial who may not be like you.
Right.
And so super, super, super important to kind of think about. And then, the last thing is, every woman who goes on this cancer journey has their own journey. Um, some may be very wealthy, some may be very poor, some may be black, some may be white, some may be well educated, some may not be well educated. But breast cancer is a common bond that links so many women together. As our closing question, what advice would you have for women who are facing this diagnosis, and for their caregivers who are, or their loved ones or their support systems who are helping them through this? What would you tell each of these women as they take this journey?
Okay, I'll start with the caregivers. I'm glad you brought them up because I believe I've been a caregiver. As I said, I took care of my mother who had Alzheimer's, and she lived with me until she had a medical crisis and had to go to the nursing home because nursing is not my background. So I've been a caregiver, and I believe that a caregiver is a special type of survivor. And so I'm always concerned about the caregiver, and I call caregivers to this day just to check in with them, to make sure that they are taking time to take care of themselves, that they're asking for help, that they're taking a break, and not to feel bad about them, because we all need time to refresh and recharge. And if you're caring for someone on a regular basis like that, you tend to run out of fuel a little faster because it's all day long,
It
all
goes back
day and
to
all
the
night.
superwoman syndrome that you were
Yes,
talking about before.
yes. So caregivers definitely need to take care of themselves. And then for people who are starting the journey, again, I think it's really important to do it on your terms, to do it in a way that feels good for you. I'll just give you a quick example. I decided that I wasn't going to have a conversation about cancer every day. And I knew that there were family and friends who wanted to know how treatment was going and what they could do to help. But I was not going to answer 40 calls every day. I could not have cancer consume my life like that. So I decided to set up text blast messages. And I would send out text messages. Chemo went well today, or chemo didn't go well today. I had a big issue with low white blood cell counts. So my treatment should have taken 6 months. It took a year and a half just trying to deal with all of that. And I could tell them that was my way of communicating with them. And it worked for me. So you have to figure out, if you're on this journey, what's going to work for you. I will say this: if you get a diagnosis, people are going to want to help. It's great in advance to put together a list of ways that people can help you. Because if you see somebody on the street and they'll say, can I help you? Well, at the time, you might not be thinking of it. But if you've already generated a list, then it's easier to give them a response. Because somebody might say, well, can I cook you something? Oh, well, chemo's kind of shot my taste buds here. But, I would really like to go for a walk. Maybe somebody could go for a walk with me. I'd like that kind of companionship. But if you have a list of things that would be helpful to you, it makes it easier for you to respond. And then it helps the other person who wants to help you as much as possible. I think that's a great, great thing to do.
Yeah,
And give
it kind of
yourself
makes me
time.
it
Go
kind of
ahead.
makes me think of, like having a wedding registry, right? We all have like our registries where we say, look, these are the things that I want or need. And it really helps the other person, because then they know what to get you.
Right,
And so I
right.
think your point of people want to help, and you may
Mhm.
not at the time kind of know what they can do or what they can't do, but having a list is such a great idea. And I
I
love
like what
the
you said.
text blast issue too. I had a
Mhm.
friend who did that and it worked great.
I like your terminology, the cancer registry. I might have to take that from you, Dr. Chagbar. And the other thing I think is important is is to let the journey be what it is. You know, there were days where I told my caregiver, I don't want to go to chemo today. I just don't want to do it. I'm tired of it. And he said to me, if I have to tie you on the top of the car, you're going to chemo today. So you're going to have those moments. Allow yourself to have those moments. Don't feel like, oh my goodness, I really want to cry right now, but I can't because I'm in front of my medical team and I can't allow them to see that I'm human. Hello, you are human. I know it. Your team knows it. Just go ahead and allow the feelings to come. And when you have those times where you just don't want to be bothered with treatment or having a conversation, just let that be and don't feel self-conscious about it. You know, I'm this strong superwoman person. I can't have these feelings. Well, who said you can't? Yes, you can. You know, this is the time where we need you to be at your strongest. Do what you need to do. And when you get to the other side, it's real important not to revert back to old habits. You know, I know some survivors, well, to me, it feels like when they get to that last chemo treatment, that last radiation treatment, they just go back to eating poorly or making poor choices. You know, we've got to continue to take care of ourselves, because once you receive a diagnosis, you have an increased likelihood of having a recurrence. Well, we don't want that. So let's be proactive about our health instead of being reactive about our health.
Yeah, so important. And the other thing, that ties into that, and it's a similar theme that what we heard from Candace as well as so many other survivors, is that, this cancer journey, it sucks. But in so many people, they do realize a purpose that comes with it. And there are life lessons that they learn. There are relationships that get stronger, poor relationships that wither. There are things that they didn't think that they would be able to do that they now do. There are things in life that they savor because they look at life in a whole new avenue. And so, while cancer does suck, let's be honest, there are things that you're going to learn and that you are going to get out of this journey that might actually make you a better and stronger human. And so it's so wonderful to see people taking that positive energy and really moving it forward. Nicolle, thank you so much for being my guest here today on CHAG-PAR MD. This was a fabulous show. I will link for all of our viewers all of the resources in the description box below. Please do like, share, and subscribe. If there are other topics that you'd like us to cover, please let us know that as well. Until next week, this is Dr. Anise CHAG-PAR wishing you all a safe and healthy week.